Turn the lights back on. Wow. Retro electro tech. When real audio ruled the world.
Greetings once again, ladies and gentlemen of Vintage Audio Persuasion. This is Retro Ernest of Retro Electrotech, and here on the bench today is the famous Kenwood Model 9G, and this was produced in 1978, and it comes stepping into the ring with 80 watts per channel of punch behind its large form factor. This thing is 24.5 inch by 7.5 by about 16. So it's a big old plus size Kenwood. And anyway, this came in with a customer complaint that there was some intermittent behavior associated with the volume control, I believe. That's what's written on the tag here. So it's time to get into an evaluation. I'm sure that there may be some noisy controls and perhaps intermittent controls and what have you. Hopefully there's nothing going on beyond that, but we will see what there is to see. I already have this piped into the 8-ohm dummy load. I don't have a signal fed into it yet, but I'm going to pipe a signal on in, and it's plugged into the current limiter. So for starters, let me go ahead and pan up. I'll kind of pull back and pan up a little bit to the current limiter. I will flick that on and we'll see what there is to see and see if we get the protection relay and all that good stuff, okay? When I apply power to the receiver, the bulb that I pull in will initially come up bright, and then it should dim down and just hold steady. So let's see what we have here, and we'll listen out for the relay as well. Okay, and there was a relay. So what I'm going to do is just let it sit for a couple minutes on the dim bulb tester. Make sure that it doesn't try to draw heavy current and run away and all that nastiness. And if everything looks good, I will remove it from the dim bulb tester and let it run wild, and go from there. And we'll start getting into some testing, get a signal into it and see what our output is, and play around with the controls and see what we have going as far as finicky controls, staticky controls, intermittent controls, and all that stuff, and see if there's any other problems as well. Okay, so let's get to that. So before continuing on with function testing, I just wanted to open up the unit so that we could take a look inside here. I already performed kind of a cursory inspection, just looking for the obvious stuff, as I always do. Signs of distressed components, things that look overheated, crispy, bulged, leaking, wiring that doesn't look right, stuff like that. Everything looks good so far, again, just based on the cursory inspection that I've done. If I get into this more, if I get the green light from the customer to move further, based on what I find, that is, because again, the primary complaint was some intermittent behavior that he felt involved the volume control. So if I find that there's more problems, it's going to depend if the customer wants me to move forward with more work. So it's really not my decision. But other than that, let's just kind of get into what I need to get into, and I'm going to flip this around, and we'll take a look at the bottom side real quick, just for those of you that are curious as to what one of these looks like internally, and we'll go from there. And here we are in the belly of the beast, the underside. And right off the bat, I noticed there are solder joints that can certainly benefit from being touched up. Nothing too horrendous, but you'll notice here, it looks like somebody was performing a repair to this trace here. Okay. And it doesn't look bad though, so no big deal there. But that's the kind of thing that I go in and do when I'm opening things up. I like to perform my cursory inspections, and as I've pointed out before, I will take my magnifier and I will divvy up circuit boards into quadrants, little sub-quadrants, and take one at a time and just kind of look at solder joints and traces and such to see if there's anything I need to note so that I can come back and, you know, again, touch up solder joints or repair traces and things like that if need be. So I pointed that out before. So anyways, let me also say that in servicing the controls, I will have to remove some boards. There's a little bit of access to a few of the controls, but I'm going to have to get into the front panel, remove the front panel. I will probably have to remove the lamp assembly on the top side so that I can have full access in there. That's the only way to do it right, is to have proper access, so everything's going to have to come out in this area. That's just the nature of the beast in these type of receivers, where you just don't have a clear shot at the controls and the switches, you know, pots and switches. So that's that. Anyways, let's get into looking at the functions, and we'll just kind of go through the controls while I have a signal piped in, and we'll look at things on the scope to see what we see in terms of noise, distortion, signal cutting in and out, that sort of stuff. So let's go ahead and get to it. Okay, so everything's ready to go, and the unit's been running fine for a while now. So I have, you know, signal piped in, it's hooked up to the scope, ready to go. So let's see what there is to see here. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I will end up panning the camera over to the screen of the oscilloscope. I will bring up a little bit of volume, and I'll just do that right now. I'm going to bring up a little volume there, and you can see we have signal on both channels if you look on over there. I'll zoom in a moment. Now, when I first powered this up, when I was sitting with this receiver while it was on the current limiter, I noticed when I was just looking at the scope the first time around, the right channel was cutting in and out, and the signal was jumping all over the place. So what I did was I shut the unit off, and I exercised the volume control and the balance control and all that. I didn't inject any contact cleaner because, again, I need to remove the boards and gain access to the openings and all that to do it properly. But I just wanted to exercise the controls just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And sometimes if you do that, you can kind of work through an intermittent signal, a noisy signal, enough just to regain the signal for a little while. And but anyways, when I turned it back on, I had both channels. So there's definitely some intermittency in the controls, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So what I'm going to do is, while I have the unit panned over to the scope, I'm going to go through and work the various pots and switches so that we can see what's going on as far as signal cutting out, noise, and all that. Okay, we'll just kind of keep an eye on the signal and go from there. Okay, so I am back, and one thing I want to mention too, well, actually a couple things. First of all, I had to step away for a little bit, and I left this signal piped into the receiver for quite a while, and as you can see, everything is still stable on the oscilloscope screen, so that's a good thing. And I don't see anything getting intermittent, getting jittery or whatever, at least on its own, while it's sitting here idle somewhat. I do have the volume up a little bit, obviously, as you can see, because there's signal on the screen there. But I've left it sitting here idle for a while, and it's not destabilizing and, you know, jumping all over the place or I'm not losing signal on any of the channels there, the 2 channels. So that's that. However, if I do start, and you'll see when I do start moving the controls around, there are some controls that are worse than others, and I think that most of the problem that the customer was experiencing was in the controls, or is in the controls. So that doesn't mean that something else might not crop up during testing. But again, like I already said, if I remove problematic controls, dirty controls, intermittent controls from the equation, that's a good start. So to the customer, what I do want to say is I can't assume that you know what it is we're looking at and you really know kind of what I'm doing and what the objective is. So I'm going to explain it in simple terms. So what you're looking at on the screen is the signal that I have fed into the back of your receiver, into the auxiliary input jacks. I have what's called a 1 kilohertz tone coming from a audio signal generator or a function generator. It generates tones, signals, and I have that feeding in to the back of the the receiver, as I already said. And I'm going to give you an idea of what that sounds like and why I don't have your unit hooked up to speakers so that you can hear what it is I have piped into your receiver. Okay, so you can see that little mini amplifier speaker that I have sitting on the transformer of your receiver there. So I'm going to show you what that signal sounds like that you were looking at on the oscilloscope screen. Okay, so there you go. Now you can understand why I wouldn't want that hooked up to the speakers. I wouldn't want to listen to that. So let me go ahead and pan back to the oscilloscope screen. And there you go. That's a graphic representation of that signal that you heard. That's a 1 kilohertz sine wave, a 1 kilohertz tone. So when I'm going through testing a receiver and I want to put a signal into it and kind of trace out the signal, that's kind of what we're doing here, so you can get an idea of what it is I'm talking about. So you might be saying to yourself, well, aren't you supposed to have speakers hooked up when you have the volume on the receiver turned up? Yes, you do have to have the speaker terminals terminated into a load, either speakers, or in this case I'm using what's called a dummy load to dump the energy, the energy that's leaving your speaker terminals. It needs to be dumped into a load, and that's exactly what your stereo is terminating into right now. Up on the wall there I have a couple of 1,000-watt dummy load resistors. So it's not going to do any harm to your receiver when I have the volume turned up, even though I don't have it hooked up to speakers per se. So that's what's going on here. I wanted to explain that to you, and I guess even to some of you newer ones that don't really know what's going on. That might be a kind of a good explanation for you guys as well. But anyways, so I'm monitoring things. Let me get back to messing around with the controls. Keep an eye on the oscilloscope screen. Obviously, we don't want to listen to that 1 kilohertz tone, so we're looking at it on the screen. So I'm going to just kind of bring the volume control, up and down. I'll kind of mess with it a little bit and just kind of exercise it. And let's see if we get any noise or any intermittent behavior. Let's bring it back up. It seems like that's holding pretty good. Like I said in the very beginning when I first powered it up, that yellow trace that you see on the screen was cutting in and out. It was jumping all over the place, and when I sat there, like I said, and really started exercising the controls, the volume and the balance pot, things got better. So anyways, here's the balance control. Keep an eye on the screen, and that doesn't look too bad anymore. Yeah, you can see it. Well, actually, you can see a little bit of noise there. You see that? Okay, so we're still getting a little noise in that control there. Yeah, right there. So all these controls need to be serviced. Okay, there's no mystery there, and very typical, very common with these old pieces of equipment, amps, receivers, and all that, that have controls, switches and pots and all that. They get, you know, they get a bit dirty over time. Dust and little pieces of debris work their way in, and the factory lubricants start to degrade and dry out. This is the treble control here. Okay, it's a bit noisy, some noise in it. All right, here's our mid, a little bit bouncy and what have you, but our bass control, it's not too bad. Let me mess with the speaker control here. And you can see there's a little noise in that speaker control. Okay, just a little bit. Speaker switch. We have A, B, and C. All right. Okay, now our filter switches here are subsonic filter switch. That ain't too bad. Our high filter here, that's a little noisy there. See that kind of jumping around and getting a bit staticky there. Okay. There's our loudness control. All right. Mono. And then the worst switch is the auxiliary. Okay, and let me just pan down real quick. Okay, so this auxiliary switch here, and take a look at the signal there when I look at that. You see how bad that is? Yeah, that one definitely needs to be serviced. So the moral of the story is that the controls need to be serviced, and I think that's where most of your problem is. Like I said, it doesn't mean that something else won't creep up as I continue with testing, but I think that the bulk of the intermittent behavior that you were describing was in fact initially, you know, in your volume control and your balance control. Maybe this auxiliary switch, I don't know if you have something plugged into the auxiliary back at home, if you have a component fed into the auxiliary, and when you were you know, switching over to your auxiliary input, if you were experiencing that, because that's definitely a problem. So we'll get this all squared away. I am going to get back with the customer, and I'm going to for you guys that are following along with this video, I'm going to contact the customer and see if he wants to have me dive in and get this all squared away, and hopefully there's no other problems than the controls. I think that we're looking good otherwise. The signal is pretty stable, and it has, you know, it's remained that way. So one last thing before I cut this video here, get with the customer and you know, see if he wants me to move forward, at which point I will go into servicing the controls. I'll make a part 2 video on this and final testing and all that. But let's go ahead and see what this unit is putting out. Okay, so let's see what this receiver, what the amp is putting out. I'm going to bring up the volume and drive it into clipping. You'll see the tops of the waveform on both channels flatten out, okay, at the tops. Okay, you see that? I'm going to drive it into hard clipping there. Let's go ahead and back it off just a little bit. And we were at about, at the peak there, we were right about 84 watts per channel into 8 ohms. So that's good. Your receiver is rated at 80 watts per channel into 8 ohms. So it's living up to that and just a bit more. So everything's looking good there. You know, can the overall performance and fidelity of this receiver be improved? If I was to go in and do restorative work and really get down and dirty and bring this thing back to factory spec, absolutely. but it's performing okay right now. Maybe down the road, if you want me to do more work on it, if you want your receiver recapped, get those old electrolytics out of there to help preserve the longevity of this receiver, then great. We could talk about that sometime. But other than that, I'm going to go ahead and get to it, guys. Those of you that are following along, as always, I provide these videos to the customer as an update to what's going on, especially as far as this evaluation is concerned. And but again, for those of you that like to follow along, if the customer gives me the green light to go ahead and get into this a bit more, then I will be bringing out a part 2 video. And also let me just go ahead and back out. So anyways, yeah, I'll be back and we'll kind of get into this a little bit more, get into some audio testing, and then get this one sent home. Other than that, as I always say, peace, love, music, and the vintage audio that brings it to your ears. Till next time, you all take care of yourselves.
This is a poor man's shoe production.